Hey, welcome back to Sober Now. I'm Jim LaPierre. Today we're going to start a series, actually, of conversations where we're going to be focusing on relationships and recovery. It's always amusing to me when I work with couples. There's a little bit of anxiety around asking, what's my relationship history? Because frankly, who wants to get couples counseling from somebody that's been divorced 3 times? So, I'm an old married guy. My wife and I, very fortunate, we've been together over 30 years now. And yeah, I think I've learned a thing or two about relationships along the way and what makes a successful partnership. But I've also learned a lot from supporting people in recovery and seeing some of the most common mistakes that people make. And there's a lot of them. There's a simple reason for that. What we know about partnerships and parenting and how to relate to people in healthy ways is something that most of us learn the majority of that in our family of origin. And so if you grew up in a happy, healthy, well-adjusted family, great, you probably know a lot of good things. But if you grew up in a family like mine, then there's a lot of things that you learned about what not to do, and there's a lot of things that maybe you're not familiar with or not sure how to do. So we're going to start at the beginning, and the biggest mistake that people in recovery make, of course, is getting into a relationship before they're ready, before they've got a year clean and sober, before they've really made some huge investments in themselves. And contrary to popular belief, the biggest reason that we tell people not to get into a relationship in their first year is because it's a distraction from yourself. And we're people who tend to avoid ourselves. We're people who seek out shiny distractions because there's a lot of things about ourselves that hurt or that are scary when we're paying attention to them. We're still dealing with the wreckage of our lives. We're still rebuilding. We're still trying to get healthy. There's a million things that demand and deserve our attention. But, oh, wait, I think I've met somebody. I understand. I get it. While recovery is oftentimes best born out of desperation, partnerships are not. And the most intense partnerships that I've seen start in places like homeless shelters and psychiatric hospitals and rehabs and recovery centers. And for as insane as we all know that to be when you're on the outside looking in, if you're in the middle of that, if you find yourself really strongly attracted to somebody and feeling compelled to act on that, well, that's understandable. See, when we're drowning, human nature is grab onto somebody. But too often, we end up taking them down with us instead of mutually supporting each other. The bottom line is we're just not ready for that. And our disease will use that. Your addiction wants you to focus on anything other than yourself. And as I'm often pointing out to people, even in sobriety, even when we choose not to give the disease what it wants most, which is our drug of choice, it'll take anything it can get, anything that's unhealthy, anything that distracts us from ourselves. A friend of mine who's an old timer in AA says, well, my disease wants me dead, but it'll settle for miserable. So let's pay attention. Let's focus on your goals and your recovery. And my suggestion to you is that a relationship not be one of them at this time. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have sex. That doesn't mean that you're not going to socialize. It means that we're going to do a couple of things that, quite honestly, are a big change for many of us, which is we're going to do things honestly, openly, and with a great deal of accountability. So just like everything else in your program, having honest, open goals and communication works in this part of our lives as well. So in the first year, clean and sober, you're going to be working on all kinds of relationships. But for people in recovery, when we talk about relationships, we're almost exclusively referring to the romantic kind. So relationships with our children, relationships with our parents, with other family members, relationships with friends and coworkers, the relationships that we form amongst people in recovery. These are of paramount importance to getting sober, staying sober, and changing our lives. They're a solid foundation that we can build on or rebuild, as is often the case with our families. But those people, chances are going to be around when everything else falls away. So we need them, and we need to cultivate those relationships, which is, frankly, a tall order no matter what. It's especially difficult because we tend to be disconnected from selves. Um, I don't think we conceptualize how we relate to ourselves as a relationship, but it really is. So if I'm busy being my own worst enemy, it's going to be hard for me to be a friend to you. I say that the first year of recovery is a time where really we're just getting to know ourselves. We're learning how to live in a healthy, manageable way, and ideally, we're paying enough attention to ourselves to notice when we're doing things that are unhealthy. Even something that seems as benign as beating ourselves up is unhealthy. It leads to an unhealthy relationship with self, which undermines our ability to relate to everybody else. So, early recovery, focusing on the relationships that are always going to be there. If you're really thinking about getting into a romantic relationship, then my challenge to you is, what do you bring to the table? What do you have to offer at this time in your recovery process? Wouldn't it be better if you were on more solid ground? Wouldn't it be better if you were healthy before you undertake this? I get it. For most of us, we're trying to get something today that we've never had. Maybe you've never had a healthy partnership. Maybe you've always felt like your relationships are toxic or lead into all kinds of problems. And the desire to have that in your life is very strong. I get it. But naively, most of us believe the lies that we're still told by romantic comedies, that the perfect love fixes everything, and that if you meet the right person, your whole life just magically falls into place. Okay, we all know that happily ever after is a lie sold to us by Hollywood, but recovery and the promises of a good program, those are real, those are true. Most of us find them hard to believe early on, but your life can be exponentially better. And investing in relationships like with a recovery coach, with a counselor, with peers and friends and programs based on recovery, those relationships are going to take you a lot further. So that's the starting point. Please email me your questions, jim@sobernow.com. Do me a huge favor if you can like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's a huge help to us. And let us know what other kind of topics you want to hear about. And we'll be back soon with some more conversations about relationships. Thanks.